You know, I was having a discussion with a buddy of mine who lives on the other side of the country. And we hadn't talked in a little bit, so we started running down some of the films that we're really excited about and everything. And of course, we get around to Doomsday. And as we started talking, you know, of course, it's a can't miss. You know, knowing some of the things that are happening in the movie, people are going to love it. You can already feel the energy and excitement for it. Hell, 50 billion people watch the idiotic chair watch. I mean, it's a can't miss, right? But that got us on to a little bit of a conversation of, well, what could go wrong? And I thought about that more after the conversation. And so I thought it would be interesting for us to take a minute and talk about what I consider to be the 5 mistakes that Avengers Doomsday has to miss. Now, listen, Avengers Doomsday, we are a movie show talking about movies. There is no doubt that Avengers Doomsday is going to be the biggest movie of the year. It might be the biggest movie of the last 5 years. We'll have to see. But it's a major, major thing, and a lot of stuff is riding on it. And so I think there are going to be 5 big things they're going to need to avoid. So, Rob, I want to run down my 5 things. Then I want to get your impression of those things, and if there's any you would add to the list. All right?
Okay.
So with that said, let's get on to the first big mistake that Avengers Doomsday has to miss. It's got to avoid pointless cameos.
So Palpatine can't return.
Somehow. Now, here's a great example of this, okay? Spoiler warning for any of you who have not seen the final episode of Maul Shadow Lord. But, you know, at the end of Maul Shadow Lord, at least in the last episode, to nobody's surprise, Darth Vader shows up. When you start hearing the, oh, my skin crawled, my goosebumps, like all that kind of stuff. Now, you can say, of course, popular cameo. Yes, but it fit the story. If Maul's there, Emperor don't like that, you got to send your heaviest hitter and you got to take care of that. It made sense. It served the story. It wasn't just dropping in Darth Vader so people who know Star Wars can go, oh, look, it's Darth Vader. We know him. It wasn't pointless. It's fine that we're going to get a lot of players in Avengers Doomsday. That's totally fine. We get it. I just think they need to make sure that whichever characters they drop in, there's a clear purpose for why were they on that screen for 30 seconds? Why were they there for those 5 minutes? Whatever it is, make sure there is a narrative, functioning, purposeful reason why they pop up. As long as you do that, the cameos can feel perfectly organic and perfectly placed. But if you don't, then it just starts to feel like member berries a little bit, and it can totally sidetrack you.
One exception.
What's that?
Madison.
Yeah. She can be in Secret
Even then,
Wars.
have her appearance mean something or do
As long,
something.
wouldn't it be funny if she's there with Wong and they don't even say why? They're like dating.
They're just watching something on TV
Yeah.
with a big bag of chips. Oh, God, I do want... You know, I hated Madison when we first met her, and now I want nothing more than more Madison. All right, so the first big mistake they've got to avoid is pointless cameos. Here's the second mistake they need to avoid. Just using the movie as a setup for Secret Wars. You cannot do that. We all know what Secret Wars is, and we all know how big of a deal that is. And this is the event. The events of Doomsday are what's going to then transfer us into the events of Secret Wars. But you've got to treat this movie as its own standalone thing. I take us back to Infinity War and Endgame. Are the two forever connected? Absolutely. But was Infinity War its own true beginning, middle, and standalone movie at the same time? The answer is yes. It served its own purpose, its own function. It's had its own stories to tell. And it then perfectly ushered us into Endgame, absolutely, as a continuation. But it never felt like a part one of a part two.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? It never felt like it's an incomplete thing. That movie was its own movie. Empire Strikes Back, even though it has this cliffhanger at the end, it was its own movie. I was just talking about Fellowship of the Ring. It was its own movie. They've got to make sure they don't fall into the trap as excited as everybody is to do one of the ultimate comic book stories of all time, Secret Wars, to not just treat this movie as a setup for Secret Wars, make sure it gets the credit and the respect that it deserves. So that's something they got to be careful of. All right. The third mistake that they must avoid in making Avengers Doomsday is assuming how much inside baseball knowledge the audience has. This has been a big thing for Marvel for a long time about forcing the audience to do homework, whether it's with previous MCU stuff. But listen, there's a lot of stuff that we're all looking forward to in Secret Wars, right? And there's a lot of gooey goodness in there. But when you're making this movie, you cannot assume that the audience understands or knows any of those concepts. You have to approach it like this is the first time everybody in the audience is being exposed to even the skeleton of this Secret Wars story that we're all building up to, right? If they make the mistake of having a bunch of things play out that they just assume that the audience knows, not just for Secret Wars, but for past Marvel Cinematic stuff, right? I've always contended that the true magic secret sauce to the success of the MCU was the fact that they treated every single movie as a valid and real entry point for a new fan to hop on board and never feel lost. They've lost a little bit of that in the last few years. And so they have to really make sure they don't fall into that trap with Doomsday. So I'm going to say that's the third thing that they need to avoid. The fourth thing that they must avoid, don't skimp out on the action. Now, I can already hear a lot of people going, well, John, sometimes Marvel gets criticized for being nothing but action. True. But again, in having your first Avengers film in 7 years, and an Avengers film that is leading us into Secret Wars, and with a lot of the emotional hooks we have going, there could be the temptation to make nothing but a dramatic movie. And that's fine, except this is an Avengers film. I just need to know that they're going to make sure that as they're telling this deep, character-rich story, that they also remember it's an Avengers movie. I loved Brandon Routh's Superman Returns. I love the movie, but the one criticism I've always had about it, the way I kind of describe it, is it was a great movie that failed to be a great comic book movie. Ultimately, he fought a mountain and fought a falling plane. And, you know, you got to remember that at its core, this is a comic book film. You want to be more than that. You want to transcend the genre, but you are still a part of the genre. And I just hope they make sure not to forget to pack in a good amount of action, because it is, after all, an Avengers film. All right. The fifth thing that I say is a mistake they must avoid, and this might be the biggest one. None of these are in any particular order, but this might be the biggest one. Don't fail to have a definitive ending. Avoid this mistake. Again, let's go back to Avengers Infinity War. You can say all you want. It was a cliffhanger. No, it wasn't. The ending of Infinity War was not a cliffhanger. It was a definitive ending.
They lost.
Thanos won.
And it was like half a decade before they even regrouped.
Yes,
Right.
It was 5 years later. The ending of Infinity War was the bad guy won. That was it. Now, we pick up the story later on. Sure, that happens in every movie franchise.
All because of a rat.
Sure, but you have to make sure, while we all know that we are heading into Secret Wars, and while it's perfectly fine that, like Empire Strikes Back, the Empire wins, but hey, it leaves us with this door open that Han's been taken, Luke and Leia have managed to rendezvous with the fleet. We know we're heading into the next story. That's fine. Have an open door, all that kind of stuff. Introduce what's going to be bringing us there. But at the same time, this movie has to have a beginning, a middle, and an end. It's got to have its own ending. So this kind of ties back to the point number 2, that you've got to make sure this stands as its own movie. And a big part of that is making sure it has a definitive ending, much like Infinity War did. So again, my personal 5 big mistakes that I think Doomsday is going to have to avoid is, number 1, don't have pointless cameos. Have cameos. Just make sure they have a function. Number 2, Don't just treat this movie as a setup for Secret Wars. Otherwise, you're doing disrespect to the movie and you're doing disrespect to the audience. Number 3, don't assume that the audience knows any of the lore. Don't make anybody do homework to be able to go and watch this movie. Number 4, do not chimp out on the action. Yes, we want good character work. We want a good narrative, but it's a comic book movie at its heart. Make sure we got a lot of action to go along with it. And then number 5, do not fail to have a definitive ending to the movie. Even one that opens doors going into Secret Wars, don't fail there. Anyway, Rob, those are what I think are the 5 key things they've got to avoid. Do any of these stand out to you? What do you think about them? Are there any that you would add to this list?
There's one thing. Okay. I don't think that anybody, your 5 things I think are all points very well taken. I don't think we have to worry about those things. However, that said, here's what I worry about the movie. By all metrics, by the things that I understand about Hollywood, the movie cannot help but be longer than 3 hours already. Now, they've talked about they're re-releasing Endgame.
Right.
I think, and this worries me, I think because of the runtime that they have, and I understand releasing a movie that's 3 hours long. I mean, they have the precedent of Endgame and all that, but there are ways. I can't really get into why I feel this way, but there are ways that they could move things out of Doomsday and put them into Endgame. Just not big scenes, but small things from the first 30 minutes of Doomsday to alleviate the running time. They could add an end. I mean, I'm not going to talk about specifics, but they could do that. And I hope they don't, because I think that if I can say this, the structure of Doomsday, because now it sounds like I'm telling tales out of school. I thought it is pretty perfect, but I could see them going, they have a problem. They have a running time issue that the studio is going to say, bro, you guys can't make a 3-hour plus movie, even though what they were working from is already 3 hours plus. And I'm like, that's some bold shit. Like I think an audience, I don't think running time is a factor in this movie. And I just worry that I thought Project Hail Mary might have been hurt, even though it's made a ton of money, so it doesn't matter. So I'm wrong. But I think Project Hail Mary could have been a better movie if it was a little bit longer and they had scenes that they took out of the film. It doesn't matter, because what I think is immaterial based on what it made. But I think with Doomsday, they've got a real issue that they're going to talk about. And it's going to go back and forth, and they're going to edit. They're going to put things in and take things out. I think in the case of Doomsday, I worry about they'll cut too much out of it just to keep it at 2:45 or something. I hope they don't. That's the worry that I have.
Yeah, I'm not worried about it.
I am.
I think Kevin Feige will make the film the length it needs to be. And if that's 2 hours and 15 minutes, it's going to be 2 hours and 15 minutes. If it's going to be 3 hours and 5, they'll do 3 hours. Now, I don't think they're going to let them make a 3.5 hour movie. But I think going into it, they know that. So I don't think the Russos and McFeely sat down. Was it McFeely or was it, I think it was McFeely. Anyway,
it's McFeely, I believe.
Yeah. I don't think they sat down and said, we're going to put together a 5-hour movie and see how long they'll. No, I think they knew how long they.
I agree, and I think that more than any other MCU movie, the setup, the first 40 minutes of this movie are incredibly important, and I think that based on, call it what we know, they did a wonderful job with those first 40 minutes.
Yes,
and I think that there's ways that they could pull stuff out, which I hope they don't. That's all I'm gonna say.
All right, guys. What do you think? What do you think about any of the 5 things that I'm saying they've absolutely got to avoid? Do you disagree with any of them? Are there some things you would like to add to that list? Whatever you guys think, jump down into the comment section below and let us know your thoughts. Hey guys, thanks so much for watching this video. Make sure you like the video, leave a comment, and subscribe to our channel. And don't forget, we have a daily podcast called the John Campea Show podcast, available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcasting app of choice. Go and subscribe to it today so it'll be there when you need it.